Are you asking yourself, how do I lead in the situation when there's no one specifically in charge? Multiple stakeholders are involved in the decision making process, and there's no way that you can force people to do what needs to be done. Well, leadership is not about the job, the title, or the position. It's not about you at all. It's about the purpose, the group of people who are charged with producing something related to that purpose in partnership and collaboration with others. Leadership today requires a paradigm shift in order to be more effective and deliver results. Hold on for a great episode that will completely shift your leadership paradigm.
Every single one of us is a leader and could be a leader.
It started with a local coalition in our county.
Strategies you know, but stories you don't.
Data is the currency of prevention.
We want to reduce the negative and we want to promote the positive.
Collaboration is the only way to move the prevention needle.
About connecting the research with the practitioner.
Put something out there that was kind of off the wall and create a community of prevention.
It's a passion, it's a real love to try to help make our world a little bit better, a little bit happier, small pieces at a time.
It's said an overnight success takes 16 years.
If we didn't plan for the change, but if we didn't help orchestrate it, then change is going to be upon us.
When it comes to the spiff, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Because the real power is in the process.
Ultimately, all of us want success in the work we're doing. We don't want to do mindless work. Proactive, participatory planning promotes positive, preventive progress.
This is the Mid-America PTTC podcast, where we believe prevention is better together, and together we are stronger. I'm your host, Dave Clausen, and I'm the director of the Mid-America Prevention Technology Transfer Center. This is episode 42, and in today's episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Irina Firstman, the co-founder and CEO of Hue Life. She just finished an 8-year journey researching how leadership occurs in a multi-stakeholder, loosely coupled system where members represent independent entities, individuals, or organizations, and they exist to advance a common good. This episode is a nice preview for the deep dive webinar she'll be delivering on July 14th. Now check out the show notes for the registration link. Let me just tell you a little bit about Irina. Like I said, she's a co-founder and CEO of Hue Life, which is a training, facilitation, and consulting company on a mission to educate, facilitate, and inspire engagement in meaningful action for the greater good of communities and organizations. She designs and facilitates experiences, including strategic thinking, planning retreats, learning programs for personal and professional development, and conflict resolution. She also manages business development activities, partnerships, and community engagement programs, works to conceptualize new products and services, and develop learning experiences and programs. She does this all while challenging the conventions required for innovation. She was born in the USSR and spent the first half of her life in Russia, Crimea, and the Ukraine. She moved to the US in 2002, and she's actually co-founded a number of organizations and is currently a member of Rotary, Minnesota Change Management Network, International Society of Organizational Development and Change, and Technology of Participation Network. She completed her doctoral research on leadership in loosely coupled multi-stakeholder systems at the University of St. Thomas, Minneapolis. Her passion for social justice and love for learning is what drives her to create organizations that will continue to provide learning opportunities and experiences in the arena of systems change at all levels. Irina is a survivor, an entrepreneur, a fighter for justice and freedom. Her personal mission is to inspire action for the greater good for 2 reasons. She cares about the impact she can personally make on the world, and it is just plain fun. And before we get into the content, we'd like to thank our funder, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And a quick note, this podcast is supported by SAMHSA, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS, and is 100% funded by SAMHSA and HHS. The contents are those of the guests and speakers and do not necessarily represent the official views of nor an endorsement by SAMHSA or the U.S. government. All right, without further ado, let's get into the episode. Okay, y'all get excited. I've been looking forward to this podcast episode for a while. I'm honored to welcome Irina to our podcast. And some of y'all probably haven't had a chance yet to meet her, but Irina, we're glad to have you here. And let's just open up and start with can you tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit about Hue Life as well for those that haven't experienced Hue Life yet?
Great. No, thank you, Dave, for invitation. That is my honor to be here on this podcast because a lot of what I've learned had to do with coalitions and with people like yourself, helping me understand what happens in the system where there is no structure necessarily and no one specifically in charge, like we're used to think about hierarchical and traditional leadership models. So I'm excited to share what I've learned. Hue Life is an organization that is concerned with moving people from idea to action. We are here to facilitate and train individuals in various tools, techniques, but also develop personal and leadership skills for engaging with communities and stakeholders. My story starts way back. I came to the United States in 2002 with the intent to continue my career in education. So I finished my master's degree in education and computer science as a minor back in Ukraine, wanted to be a teacher, started my teaching career here, and quickly realized that I am not as equipped as I thought to deal with teenagers and middle school or high school age students. Accidentally, I was introduced to facilitation as a way to help groups think and work and plan and make decisions together. And as I was learning about the field of facilitation, I became more and more passionate about this approach to working with people, but also educating. So I always looked at facilitation as a way to learn together as a group. And through that learning process, change the way we think, accept different ways of being together and design and develop a shared vision and a shared plan for going forward. So it started with the personal journey, learning what it takes to be in the process with others, both as a participant, but then later as a guide, as a facilitator. And as I was meeting and expanding my network, I met a lot of people who think similarly. So I wanted to make sure that we combine our forces and continue to do good together as a team. And so that led to Hue Life being formed in 2017 with those who were willing to step into that circle of like-minded individuals who are interested in greater impact. So several of them have been on this podcast. Several of them are your colleagues and friends. And so ever since that beginning of Hue Life, it continued to be a learning process for us as a team and for me too, as a leader and as an individual. Every year, every project, every partnership, every collaboration we engage with is a learning opportunity. So my job is to continue to look back, reflect, document, and help all of us understand what happens when we collaborate, how leadership occurs, how we take ownership and responsibility for different initiatives, so we can continue to develop both methodologies to help others, but also processes through which they need to go through to get to that desired state. I don't know if that's too much. Let me know if you need more. but it is all personal to me from every sector, every angle of this journey.
When you kind of shared about facilitation, helping folks think together, learn together, plan, and make decisions together. And for our listeners, I don't know if they're nodding their heads, but that sounds like a prevention coalition to me. Folks needing to come together, think together, learn, assess, and plan. And yes, I'm just going to jump right into it. Let's talk about leadership in a coalition. And it's a unique situation, unique dynamics. There's not that traditional hierarchy, organizational structure. Uh, but you just finished a big research study. Congratulations, by the way, where you really dove into that. And you even have a special term for it. What's that term? And sort of, can you tell us about the research study, kind of what led you to it and what that journey was like?
Are you ready for your mind to blow away?
Let me buckle my seatbelt.
Yeah. So what I shared earlier about my personal journey and how HuLife started and who's part of our team and what we do is also the reason why the research project even started to be created, right? So my quest for how things work in systems in general, how things work in communities, and how leaders work with each other. So I came from a Soviet Union, very top-down and centralized system that collapsed in 1991. I experienced 20 years of chaos. And then I came to the United States and I saw how local control plays out in action, seeing individuals at the local level being able to control what happens at the local level. So this concept of local government didn't exist in Ukraine, but it existed here. And then, of course, through the relationships I've built with yourself and others on HuLife team, like Angie Salavstedt, I was introduced to work of coalitions. And that is where my question became more and more clear. How does it happen in a system where there isn't a centralized and top-down controlled environment? Things still get done, right? Things are still moving forward. So that is where the research question came from. How does leadership occur in loosely coupled multi-stakeholder system? When I started answering that question through interviews, observations, and personal experiences, getting myself into those systems and actually myself starting two of them, one in Ukraine and one here in Minnesota, I realized that loosely coupled system is just a way of viewing any organization. It doesn't have to be literally several organizations that are multi-stakeholder coming together. Actually, if we can view every team, every department, every agency, every institution as a living, breathing, loosely coupled system, then we can envision leadership differently. But because we are, many of us, maybe not all of us, we're viewing systems more as and institutions as closely coupled, tightly coupled, controlled, bureaucratic, then because of that context, we're making assumptions and we're perpetuating that traditional leadership view of top-down, climbing the ladder, climbing the career ladder, right? So the language and the vision of that leadership phenomena is very strong and hard to change. So in the end of 8+ years of digging into this question, and specifically in the last 2 years, conducting the observations and interviews, what I've learned that leadership phenomena and how it happens different in the situations where we have no centralized control. And it's different because people have the power to walk away. So that is the new theory. In loosely coupled systems, everybody can walk away at any time. And so the work of leadership is not command and control, the work of leadership is to keep people at the table. And coalitions have done that. The coalition world, the coalition field has figured that out. Maybe not every coalition does it well, but it's better than any government agency I've been part of or worked with who cannot even picture this context to be in place within the boundaries of legal and policymakers coming together and establishing too many regulations and, of course, red tape that prevents this image of loose coupling to even exist. So that's the essence of the research and the theory. Leadership happens differently. It happens in stages and also by different people at different times, stepping into the arena, if you will, and taking responsibility. So then the follow-up question, well, who does that and why would they and what type of responsibility? And that is an exciting revelation, I think, and an ability to see different leadership acts and with those acts, different processes that individuals are engaged in, which is in the end constitutes leadership, decision-making, execution, and leading people towards the end, right, of what has been decided. So I think we all need to rethink not just what we mean by leadership, but also what we mean by being a company, being an organization. If we can see ourselves as loosely coupled, then we can envision leading differently. And again, I'm going to compliment all the coalitions that participated for providing that light to us.
I've heard many coalition members say it feels like they're the only one doing the work. Everything's falling on their shoulders. And you spoke right to it, coming to the table with that hierarchical leadership mindset and shifting our mindset to the loosely coupled leadership approach, that model, that method might just help alleviate some of that burden falling on one person's shoulders. And I love how you talked about it's about keeping people at the table. Often in prevention, we talk about getting people to the table, but we don't spend much time keeping them at the table, talking about how to keep them at the table, how to facilitate and create that collective ownership. What did you kind of learn or glean or insights when it comes to sort of creating that collective ownership in a loosely coupled multi-stakeholder system?
And that is a key insight. The collective ownership is facilitated by those who step into a level of leadership which requires a little bit of selflessness, if you will, and a little bit of humility to create a space where that sharing can occur. And in those coalitions that participated in this research, sharing can occur around power, political connections. Sharing can occur around resources. We come together and we share our resources. Sharing can occur around intellectual property, right? Creating together. And in the loosely coupled system that is designed or created by people with that mindset, with that ability to be humble, to authentically share and not manipulate, because the manipulation is the other ugly side of it, which happens when we don't know what to do with these dynamics. And I can talk about it more if you're interested, but primarily the role of key leaders, let's call them leaders at this point, is to create that space, the environment where people feel free to share without this feeling that they're taken advantage of or the feeling that they're losing out on something. So really understanding what is it that people would be willing to share and how, and creating the environment, and with that formalizing some of these relationships and making agreements, a code of conduct, if you will, of how this happens. A primary role for those initial leaders, a system begins to develop. Once it is 2, 3, 4 years into the maturity stage, and you have stakeholders identified, and you have some processes, and you have some structure. We're still using the word structure. It's just not vertical and hierarchical, but there is still some sense of infrastructure within the system. So things do get done, right? Gets done by somebody in that growth, if you will, stage. During that growth stage, continue to share power and share responsibility is the key act of leadership. What happens when it doesn't happen, when that sharing does not occur, when the mentoring and coaching does not occur, when authenticity is no longer part of the process, when humility is no longer part of the process, and I'm going to put it in a parenthesis, when experts show up to take over, we lose the loose coupling dynamic. And then becomes quickly one person driving the agenda. And then we are asking ourselves the question of buy-in. You don't need buy-in if everybody else engaged in the process of collective ownership. But you do have that language and the dynamic of getting people buy into your vision when you're the only one. And so that's a slight difference, slight mindset difference, but make a big impact on how people stay at the table.
Getting people to the table and keeping them at the table really is, like you said, the key to sustainability. But can you tell us a little more about the environment at that table that might help keep folks at the table? What does leadership look like when everybody could simply get up and walk away?
Leadership does happen differently in a system where nobody is in charge and everybody has the power to walk away. Creating the environment for people to step into that role of responsibility and ownership is a key responsibility or key point, I guess, for the individual or individuals who are having the idea to begin with to build the system. Next generation of leaders is really concerned with inviting the right people to being able to execute, to carry forward that particular idea. Once the right people are involved, again, the sharing of power, sharing of responsibility is the key. As they continue to shape the system and continue to shape the vision and they continue to shape the plans around what they are going to accomplish, is when the next layer or next level of leadership happens, is to really develop more structure around how things get done and code of conduct, how people are getting engaged with each other, how relationships are built and partnerships are maintained, but also sustainability question in terms of the resources and the product of the system. What resources are going to be needed and how we are going to go about sharing them or getting them, and what product is going to be delivered or developed by that system and who's owning that. So those things are very much at the conceptual planning, documenting, and articulating level is the primary role of leadership happening there. Once the system is mature, what happened often with experts coming in and being, in some cases, asked to put some order to chaos because we just can't get anywhere. We're talking about what we want to do, but we never quite get to action. That is where the pivotal moment can happen. It either works or it doesn't. If the coordinator like yourself or a director, whatever the title, but an individual who's coming in to help continue development of that particular coalition, of that particular system, it is really, really important to stay in the mindset of being humble, being engaging, being facilitative in how decisions are made. Because the moment the expert takes on that persona and starts driving one individual idea or agenda, that's where we start losing people and becomes more tightly controlled. Nothing wrong with that. It's just the way we know organizations work. This is our kind of default behavior, right? Go back to what we know works, and that is to build hierarchy and bureaucracy. We can avoid it. So I'm proposing that we can avoid it. We can maintain some level of loose coupling, some level of innovation and creativity that is also defined as chaos, and provide a balance to it, some order, some stability, some code of conduct and structure that helps us get the job done. So that's the biggest challenge that's going to be for us going forward, to figure out what that balance looks like and what needs to be developed within our capacity as leaders to maintain that balance.
So many questions come to mind. I'd love to just explore more, but that's what the webinar is for that's coming up, really diving into what does this model look like and really starting to help folks conceptualize what this system could look like. But looking at this, or excuse me, listening to this podcast with my coalition member, coalition leader mindset, I'm hearing this approach, this mindset, this paradigm when it comes to leadership can help get folks to the table, keep folks at the table, and create sustainability through systems as well, which that sustainability piece we could talk about a lot. And when it comes to coalition work, it is always going to be a challenge, something we've got to keep at the forefront of our mind. And actually just, maybe 2 months ago, I did a podcast episode talking about the importance of systems. We do struggle with a lot of turnover in the prevention field, folks changing roles, wearing different hats. And I stress the importance of having a system and letting that system lead and guide the process. And I'm looking forward to really learning more during the webinar about how we can have a loosely coupled multi-stakeholder system that has that room for creativity, innovation, collaboration, partnership, but still has that system as well to keep things moving in organized chaos. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but I just made it up.
It is organized chaos. Another metaphor that came to mind recently for me is it's a black matter. If you think of black matter in space, you cannot see, but it exists and it holds everything together. The universe depends on it. So think of a loosely coupled system as an organization having black matter, which is the leadership work. It keeps all the elements and components together and ensures that they're working in some kind of rhythm, right, at a certain pace, and accomplishes what it's set up to accomplish. Because another key insight, Dave, is that when the system matures and gets to the point where it's concerned with its own existence, more so than the purpose of why it was created in the first place, is when we get to the trouble we're in today in the society and crying out loud for help in terms of we need to change all the systems. Well, of course, we're noticing that happening at a large scale. And that's exactly what happened with Soviet Union and why it collapsed. It collapses eventually. Dictatorships have never survived for a long time. And so that's a challenge for us, is to learn from coalitions how you as a field was able to figure out, maybe not all the way, but there's some level of understanding how to build coalitions to the point where things can be accomplished. The next step, how can we sustain it so we don't turn into a vertical, hierarchical, tightly coupled, centralized, concerned with its own existence type of system that will collapse eventually. It's just not going to last for very long.
So I've got 2 more questions coming to mind before we wrap up this episode. But the first being, without going into too much detail, I'm curious, for our listeners, what were some of the organizations like? Were they that you included in your research? Just who were they? No names, just what types of organizations?
Yes, several of them were coalitions, local coalitions, state coalitions, and national associations that bring coalitions together. So different level of loose coupling, right? At the local level, at the state level, and at the national level. I would say about a third of them had to do with healthcare. So the range from addressing issues around, as many of coalitions who are members or connected to you, prevention, mental health, but also one specifically that comes to mind, which is unusual and different from majority, is bringing several hospitals and insurance companies, banks, state and federal agencies, county public health departments together to specifically focus on the child mortality and youth health, right? So what happened in many of those cases is that it starts as an initiative and then, or a program, and then it grows from there, either becomes a 501c3 nonprofit organization that continues to operate as a loosely coupled system. There's multiple stakeholders being engaged at different levels, board level, volunteer level, various initiatives being implemented at those agencies independently, and some programs that are done collectively. So different ways. I had one was specific to land use, right? So we have healthcare focus, land use focus, housing, homelessness. So think about different types of social big issues that none of us can solve independently, not one agency, not government, not business, not nonprofit organization, but requires all of us to come together and figure out a way to address. And so the issues ranged, again, from child mortality to land use, to economic development, to education, to providing housing for homeless. But the players are different, and how they got organized and who organized it, who was that holder, who started it, really determined how it became either a nonprofit or it remained not legally formed at all. Just a group of stakeholders continued to work for years on that issue and continued to make progress. Even though individual people are no longer the same, the organizations are still working together and kind of working through the previous plans and developing new ones.
I love how you said that all of these organizations, no matter if they were a local coalition clear up to a national, international, they're working together on big issues because we can't solve these issues alone. We've got to work together, and y'all know it's coming. You know, at the Mid-America PTTC, we believe prevention is better together, and together we are stronger. And this resonates so well with why we do what we do. And I love the shared leadership, the shared values, that culture of just inclusive decision making and engagement to really produce those better results. The last question is more about the webinar, which is July 14th for you listeners. The link will be in the show notes for the registration. What can folks expect when they join us for that webinar?
Oh boy, they are going to learn a different way of being as a leader. I think we have a model. This research produced a framework that can help us wrap our head around what it looks like to lead in this type of system. I talk about different levels of leadership that are not necessarily our levels from the perspective of linear sequence of leadership groups, but more so from the developmental stages for organization. When we start as a startup, you might have just fewer people to work with and fewer resources, and the leadership work looks different from the organization that's matured in 10, 20 years in existence, right? So there is some relationship to this maturity journey for the system, but there's also an important element of what needs to happen simultaneously. So I'll share the framework. We will walk through how it happens, and also take a look at various dimensions within each of those levels or phases of development for who steps in, how they lead, why they do what they do, and what in the end that leadership work actually looks like. What does it produce? And so it's really fascinating. It was fascinating for me to dig into it and really pull it apart so we can have clarity around those elements and being able to identify within ourselves, where am I? What level of leadership am I occupying? Who else in my system can step into these different levels and different dimensions? And what can I expect? So we can craft and we can continue to scaffold our systems that are flexible, yet have that blueprint of what needs to be in place in order for that balance to exist. And we're talking about balancing again, self and shared interest, self and shared benefit, self and shared purpose, self and shared vision. So the beautiful work of balancing is not done by one person. And so understanding where you fit as a leader and understanding how others contribute to it is going to be the takeaway from that framework.
I'm going to break out a brand new unused yellow notepad for this webinar, and I'm going to be ready to take notes. Oh, can't wait. Can't wait. Y'all register now. It's going to be awesome, and it's going to change your mindset, your paradigm when it comes to leadership and how you can have a greater impact in your communities to create safer, healthier, drug-free communities. That is just the goal. Irina, thank you very, very much for doing the research, asking the questions, and rolling up your sleeves and digging in. A lot of work. So thank you for that, and thanks for coming on and sharing today. Can't wait to see you on July 14th for the webinar. Thank you.
Likewise, I appreciate being invited, Dave, and can't wait to share more.
That concludes this episode. Thank you all for not only taking time to listen, but your continued work to make our region safe, healthy, and drug-free. If you'd like to know what training we have coming up, check out our website at pttcnetwork.org. And remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.